Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban-American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
And now for something completely different.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reality and Publishing Comics. I am Paul Gomez, the host, and this week we're going to be talking about conventions and how to get in them, a little bit different styles of conventions, and kind of a few things that you need in conventions and a few tips in there. And just like I tell everybody on every episode, I started out by looking at YouTubes and kind of having them in the background for tips and tricks and a little bit more of an understanding in the comic book world. And I like to feature some of my knowledge, and I like to bring a special guest to kind of back what I say or show a different point of view, especially since they've been in it a lot longer than me. And we have a very special guest this week, a very good friend of mine, and I would even say one of my best friends and mentors. McLain McGuire is here today.
What's up?
Welcome. How are you doing today, McLain?
Doing very good, man. It's been a busy day, and things have things have been good, man. Getting a lot of work done. How about you?
That's awesome. Yeah, just about the same. Getting stuff in line. So, if y'all don't know who McLain McGuire is, he is the man, the myth, the legend. McLain McGuire. He does just about everything. Is there anything that you don't do?
Gosh, I don't know.
so,
That's a hard.
mainly whenever I was introduced to you, you're a letterer, you're a graphic designer, you're the co-founder of Charter Comics, which is a publisher that's just breaking through barriers right now. You're also the co-founder of Cowtown Comic-Con.
Right.
And I mean, you've helped with so many artists and writers out there today, including like Ken Salinas, and I believe you have helped with David Sanchez. And I know you introduced me to tons of them. I mean, is there anything you can't do?
I'm sure there's a few things.
So today we really wanted to talk about conventions and how to get into them, how they are, and kind of what to expect, especially if you're a new comic creator getting into the scene. Absolutely. So, starting out, what is your best advice to a brand new comic creator about conventions?
The conventions are all about trying new things, and especially I think I preached this to you in the very beginning when you started hitting up conventions. Is like conventions, in the beginning, you don't know which one's going to be, I guess, in a sense, successful to you or not, and it's not really about that in the beginning. It's about getting your name out there, networking to the proper channels, and making sure you're talking to people, whether that's the people at the convention or the actual convention promoters themselves, because the convention promoters themselves can take you a lot further as well. And so, I mean, think about the bigger shows like your Reed Pops, your C2E2s, your New York Comic Cons, your Fan Expos, Dallas, and MegaCon. I mean, doing those shows could set you up for, a year's worth of shows, And so my advice on doing shows is do what you can in the beginning and then be selective on which ones are working best for you, because not every one of them are going to work, to your advantage. There might be shows that you absolutely just go to the show with a ton of product and leave without it. And then there might be a couple shows that you go into and you only sell a few things and you're just kind of like, I don't understand what's happening. So not every show's for everyone, but you should try every show out. And, my biggest thing, like I would tell you and the other guys, one of the things that us at Charter Comics still do is, even though we're 4 or 5 years into doing what we're doing, still what we do is, like, when we go to these shows, whether it's the show that we've done the last few years or a brand new show, we walk around, we look at everybody's setup, we look at what everybody's doing, not necessarily to copy that. I'm not telling anybody they should copy that, but get ideas of your own that would help you better your table, whether it's, table skirts, banners, product, like think of all the wild products that we see now,
And I definitely want to get into tips and tricks and those little things a little bit later. I one of the main questions that I get from people, whether they're new creators or have been in the business, is, how do you make money selling comics? And I tell them my thing is you got to have a business plan. And my business plan was really 2 or 3 fold. It's like conventions, local comic book stores, and Kickstarters or crowdfunding. Of course, that's going to be your first step, is that crowdfunding. Local comic book stores is a beast of its own, whether you're doing a signing or selling to the comic store itself. But conventions, to me, is probably the biggest source of income, I believe. And I tell them, you have to understand that this is a different landscape than anything else if you haven't been into it. You got to be a salesperson, a marketer, and just about like your own road crew. going into these places and learning about these places. And the thing about conventions that really struck me, and I guess kind of gave me a daze whenever I started it all, was there are so many smaller ones, medium sized, and then bigger ones with different criterias of how you get in or time frames.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk about the medium sized ones right now. Like, I'm not talking about the New York or San Diego or MegaCon. I'm talking about maybe Fan Expo, maybe a little bit, in the mid range. Usually they have a sites that they put up a few months ahead of time, and you got to kind of keep an eye on them. And I'm not talking, the smaller ones are more like the convention or library venues that'll host you for like the town or something a little bit smaller.
Community shows.
But usually I say I try to aim for the middle ones, because they have like I feel the best interaction, because you have on the bigger ones, you have all those stars and you have these big names, where the middle ones, like Cowtown, you had such a great amount of people who were in that middle frame, if you will. You didn't have those huge stars that everybody flocked to, but you didn't have, I guess, like a smaller crowd where like the libraries and conventions would have. So you had a good amount of people coming to it, and you had a decent amount of voice actors and a good amount of creators coming to it. Can you talk about how people would pick the mid-range conventions as opposed to the larger or smaller ones?
Well, so with me, when you say small, mid-range, bigger shows, I look at that type of selection as the way the show's built, the traffic of the show. And you mentioned like San Diego. Well, that's a show that could see
Huge.
500,000 people in a weekend.
Yeah.
So that's huge to me. That's like, sometimes I don't even know how to fathom that. Mid-range shows could mean a ton of different things. What I do when I go into these shows, whether it's a smaller show or a big show, I look at the fan base. Like, who can I be on a personal basis talking and about your books or your prints or whatever it is you're selling at your table. The smaller shows, you get more of a one-on-one with people, and then the bigger shows, you have a much higher traffic. So you got to be quick. You just nailed something that was really important, is like, you have to be that salesperson.
Yeah.
You have to be the person who is standing up at all times and talking to everybody that comes by. So the difference between the two shows is, like, a smaller show, you get more personal time. The bigger shows with more traffic, you got to be quick. I had a creator that I worked with 15 years ago that said you have to have that 15-second pitch, and that's it. That's all you get, And so, but the difference between the shows, there is no difference aside from your traffic and the stability and the weight of the show, meaning who's being there or who's there and who's not. There's a lot of shows that will bring in celebrities, and that brings in that traffic. Well, that traffic could also, go to your table to buy your creator-owned books or what have you, and things like that. So, I mean, Cowtown was built on basically comic books. Like, we want to build a show that's comic book related and only comic books. Like, you go in there and, like, man, if you're a collector and you go in there and you're looking for comic books, that's the place to be. And so then we'll also bring in a ton of creators and a ton of artists. We did voice actors and actresses this past time, which was a lot of fun, and we try to cater to everyone. And I don't really know what to consider the size of our show, because we don't really look at it that way. We look at it based on the fan base and what the fans are looking for, how much networking is being involved, what people's response is to the show, and what it has as a mix of, like, comics, art, some have crafts, pops, toys, you name it, so.
Yeah, and whenever I talk about different range shows, and this is just my criteria, usually I say small ranges are usually those town ones, whenever it's like
Oh yeah.
A library or a school or something putting it on, and usually it's less than 1,000 or 2,000. Where Cowtown was close to about 5,000, three to 5,000.
Yeah, I think you're in between 3,000 and 4,000, something like that.
And then like those mid-range shows to me are in those thousands, under like about 20,000. Whenever you get into 20,000, you go to fan expos and those bigger shows, which are a little bit more difficult in not difficult, a different stage of convention, if you will.
You're more tired after the weekend.
Yeah. And like I tell people, I try to aim for the mid shows, because I do feel that I got that time with those people. And whenever you talk about conventions, to me, it's the best way to sell comics and get a little bit of revenue coming into you. But also, this is one of the best ways to make connections. Absolutely. And I don't know if a brand new creator or some of the creators out there understand that it's not just about selling the comics at conventions, but you're meeting all these artists and other creators and people who are going to put eyes on your book that are in the industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's hard to get that personal kind of feeling and meeting unless you have those conventions to kind of propel you and to get an understanding of where you are in the scene and whatnot.
Well, and even as much as I've done in the industry, I love going to the big shows. Don't get me wrong. I love going to those. We were, Charter Comics was just in a meeting today with Fan Expo about the future and 2023 and all that stuff. So I love that, right? I love it.
Yeah.
But I've told you like many times that, man, you give me one of those small community shows and I can talk to people one-on-one. I love that. I love connecting with those fans. And I love taking that time, but at the same time, I love the hustle and bustle too. Like I was raised in the country, but I do love living in a big city. Like it's really weird. So the shows are the same way. Whereas, the connections to me in the smaller shows are sometimes more advanced than the bigger shows. And I'll give you an example. It's like Ken, and a couple guys did a show years ago in Victoria, Texas, called Victoria Comic Con. I'm not sure if they still have a show, but they have a few hundred people that went to the show. It's a great little show. We had a lot of fun. Well, I meet Marat Michaels and his team there, and then a year later, I'm working for the guy. And I'm still working for him. So you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to be there. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't look at these small community shows and go, I don't know, man, I'm not going to make any money. It's not about the money in the beginning. It's about what you just said, that networking, the speaking to people one-on-one, getting ideas that you never knew that you could have, that you can bring home with you and go, man, I'm going to try that, but I'm going to try it in my own way,
Yeah.
And you just never know.
Yeah. And one of the things before I started had my first comic is I actually went to Cowtown before I had a comic, and I was studying and checking out everybody who was there and talking to people and realizing how the tables were set up, the banners were set up, but more importantly, how they were selling and how I wanted to sell. And this was before my first convention. I tell people, take a few minutes of every convention to go look and see how things are done, because sometimes you might get ideas of what you want to do. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I tell people to do that they kind of seem surprised is take about 15 minutes to find the people who are running the convention. Thank them for having you, because they are putting in so much time and effort. And I got to commend you with Cowtown. It has never been any place that I had so many volunteers or people that were working come up to me and make sure that we were okay, that we needed anything, and that things were set up right. And different conventions are different whenever it comes to that.
Sure. Yeah.
As a creator, you might be out there on your own, just selling your book in another town about 6 or 7 hours plus away from your house, depending on if you fly or not. And you really rely on those volunteers from time, so you could just have a break, just to step away from your booth for a minute. So it's really great whenever you go to a place like Cowtown, and they had plenty of those. Could you talk about, how the staffs are at conventions? Because I know you've done more than just Cowtown.
Did you say the staff?
Yeah, it's kind of like the
Yeah.
volunteers and how they work
Well,
with the.
it's funny you asked that question, because I wanted to follow up on what you're saying, because you and I have worked on many things together, and you and I have gone to many shows together. And that's another thing that I didn't preach, but I always spoke out loud about, is about going to shows where the promoters and the staff and the volunteers always talk to you and always make their rounds around the show and say, hey, are you doing okay? Stuff like that. And the second thing is, it's the most important thing of the Comic-Con, is exactly what you just said, is when you leave that show, I don't care what you have to do. I don't care if they don't remember your name or your face. Go up to that person and say, hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. Give them some good positive feedback, because that's really important. Let them know how the show was. I've made friends with a ton of promoters for the last, almost 20 years I've been doing this. And I love them all, man. I think they all work equally hard on their own thing, doing what they need to do. And it's important to them. And now, being a shared business partner at a show once again, it's a good feeling when people are leaving and saying, man, thanks a lot for the show. And they're laughing and having a good time. You can tell they're just high on life. It's such a great show. I don't really care what happened, or whatever the case is. And about 10 years ago, I would do a bunch of out of state shows, and people were like that, the bigger promoters, Jimmy J from Amazing Arizona, Amazing Las Vegas Con. He's big on that, where he will make us rounds. And I remember the first time that ever happened to me, I was taking a drink of water behind my table, and he comes up and he goes, hey, you doing okay? And I thought I wasn't supposed to be drinking water at my table. And I was like, yeah, is everything cool? And he goes, yeah, I'm just checking on you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the weirdest feeling, right? So that's fun for me. And so, going into this Cowtown with the amazing team that we have, one of the things that I know Chris and I both implemented with Kim and Marty and the team is look, make sure everybody's doing okay. Yeah. Make sure everyone is good on if they need to take a bathroom break, because you just said it best again. Right. What if they're traveling from way out of town and they're by themselves and they got to go to the restroom, or they need to go get a snack or something they need a break? We need volunteers that are ready for that. And so that's what we did. We made a team over the past few years that was dedicated to that, because we didn't want to leave that show on the closing day knowing that we left anybody behind, right, or anybody not taken care of. And that was important to us.
Yeah, and I usually take one of my kids with me to my shows, or somebody else, because I feel if you have a two-person team going, it's a little bit easier. But I have seen some shows and where some of the other people, that table beside me, would be scared to leave their table. And if there wasn't volunteers around, they'd be like, hey, I just got to go do this. Can you watch my booth and just tell anyone who comes around I'll be back in a few? So, like I said, that's a real testament to you and the team at Cowtown, because I know that nobody ever had to leave their booth without a volunteer coming by. And I saw it so frequently that there were so many volunteers stepping in whenever someone just needed to step away for a moment.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, whenever it comes to connections and thanking the people who run the conventions, you got to understand that they're not only putting hours and days and probably months into these conventions, but they're trying to make it the best convention for you. But by bringing in people and bringing in other artists, making sure that you're spaced out in the right way, that you're not bogging everybody down. I remember going to a convention just recently, and I went up to the showrunner, and I thanked them for having me, and I gave them a gift, which I tend to do, give them a gift of one of my items. And they came back later that day, not only to talk to me, but they brought another showrunner from a different show to introduce him. And it was like he had told them how I had walked up to him and thanked him for everything, and how I had gave him a gift, and how I stood there and talked to him about how the layout was and everything that he was interested in. He was like, you should have him at your show so he can let you know how it's going. And that's what I tell other artists is like, I understand that you're there to sell your product, and you kind of get that tunnel vision because you do have to get in that state of mind of, I'm here to sell and meet people and hopefully gain new fans. And that's really, that's really the goal. But, these showrunners are really investing their time, effort, and money. And you never know if the show's going to do well or not. So it's like, you want to make sure that you're thanking them because they're putting their time into it as well.
Yeah, you got to remember, running a Comic-Con is a 24-hour gig.
Yeah.
And I say that very graciously and carefully. And I know everybody's different on how you run your shows, so I'm not trying to step on any toes, but running a show, and this is the first show I've been partners in, but also the fourth show I've ever helped start. And we have a fantastic team behind us on Cowtown, but it's a 24-hour gig. And that means you wake up in the morning, you check your emails, you're checking to make sure that we're promoting properly. The promoting channels are going out. We have a team with Kim, Caitlin, and a few other people that are running the promoting team, checking Instagram, checking Twitter, checking Facebook. It's an ongoing thing. And then here, myself, I'm updating the website on a daily basis, or building some sort of promoting gear, or, you got Chris over here. He's bringing in all the guests, flying people in, putting people in hotels, setting the floor plans. Like we build that floor plan. We look at this blank sheet, and it takes us days or months to build it, and, it's a 24-hour gig, and the respect and appreciation that we have to have when we go do shows at other like other Comic-Cons and stuff like that. Even though we run our own show, we highly go out now, and we already respected those other promoters, but now we very much respect them even more because the lack of sleep they're getting, the craziness that's going on. I mean, God, if you guys saw behind the scenes, you'd just be like, are you kidding me? And it's just, you got to take everything day by day. You got to keep that team together. You got to keep everybody positive. I think, having a solid team is what's important. And so when you go out there and you do these shows, and whether it's a smaller show, a medium show, or a giant show, man, do what you can. Take 5 minutes and go thank that promoter, because they're probably, unless you're Cowtown Comic-Con, they're probably going to take a nap for about 2 days afterwards.
Right.
We did not. So, I mean, the next day I got a phone call. Hey, can you meet me it was like, hey, I'm going to pick you up. We're going to the convention center. We have to do a walk. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's be ready
for next year.
I believe so. We talked about a lot of the ins and outs at the beginning of the Comic-Con. I really wanted to talk about the prices, because this is one of the things that some people don't really talk about. There's really different price sets on different conventions, and the lower end ones, again, like I said, at the library, at your school function, sometimes can be free. Sometimes it'll be like $50 to $100 kind of thing. Whenever you get into those mid-tier conventions, like I try to tell people, my range of mid-tier, they're about 150 on up to, whenever you get into Fan Expo, again, that's a little bit larger, I would say about 400 or so. So, I do tell creators, whenever you're looking at conventions, definitely make sure you look at the price of the tables, for whether it's an artist alley table, whether it's a vendor table. These are things to take into consideration, because you're going to have to pay that, sometimes months ahead of time, sometimes even a year ahead of time.
Sure.
And how would you, I guess, I guess my biggest question before I got into it was, how would you figure out which ones to do and which ones to gamble on and which ones not to? As in, if you were a first-time artist.
Well, wow, that's a tough one.
Right.
It's really all about your budgeting. Now, you
Yeah.
said something in the very beginning of this conversation where you systematically program yourself, and what you were saying was, gosh, I don't remember the exact words you used, but you're basically like preparing yourself for financially, preparing yourself structurally, with the amount of stress or whatever can be involved in what shows you're going to go to and how to pick them. Well, my thing is like whatever's in your budget. There's a lot of shows out there with fluctuating prices. You just nailed it. 150, $200. I had no idea Fan Expo was $400 a table. I've never paid full price, but I was like, wow, that's how much it is. That's crazy. So, the way I do it is like, what is it worth to me to go to the show? And I look at it like, I know the shows. I know pretty much every show. So I know the show. I know the people who run it. First of all, what's important to me are the people who run it. Yeah. Because I know the people that are running it, they're going to do several things. They have a website built. They have social media built. They're promoting not only just their guest, but they're promoting the people like you and me that are going. Not to pick on Cowtown again, but that's one of the things that we brought to Cowtown was like, everybody gets promoted. I don't know how many times I saw, or heard Kim say, I'm trying to get a hold of this vendor, and, just so she could promote it, So I like to go to shows that are going to equally promote me as well as I'm going to promote them. And what I mean by that is like, as well as I do, I don't care where I'm going, movie theater, small event, library, big show. I build my own graphic for me and my team, no matter what, to make it look like, that we are big and that we're going in big, we're going in strong. And this is the team that's, going into the show. But the most important part is their logos like this big on my flyer, not this big. This big, and then there's all the people, So that's important to me. The promoting part is important to me. So I'm willing to pay $400 a table if I know that they're promoting the show efficiently, and when I mean promoting the show, I don't mean promoting me. Me, I'm not worried about that. I mean promoting the show, because the more you promote the show, the more avenues that you have that you're promoting the show, the more people that are going to show up. That's the people that I want to come in and eventually get around to my table, and so I can introduce myself and talk about what I'm doing, and get those possible jobs or sell those books or prints or whatever it is that you house at your table, So to me, I look at promoting side of it. I look at, I don't even look at the guest. I don't know how many conversations I've had with people around our own internal team that has said, hey, McLain, have you looked at the website and see who's there? No, not really. Right. Because it's not about the guests, the celebrities, or anybody like that. It's just about how they're promoting. I want them to promote the show, so we know that that's going to be an active show. And not only is it going to be an active show, but it's going to be a show that can carry on to the next year and next year and next year. Right. That's a show that you can jump on and you can follow, like your Fan Expos and like your Chris Latasha Con Live shows and stuff like that. Those are immaculate. Right. You want to jump on board with a show that is not just going to do one show and that's it. You want to do a show that you can tour with every year.
Right. And definitely. I tell everyone, my number one piece of advice ever on any subject is ask. Ask, especially about conventions. If you're going to go into a show, ask people, have they done the convention, how it was for them, how you were treated on it. And, I've been asked about just about every convention that I've been to about how they were. And I tell people, these are about how many guests that came in. There are some conventions that are hit and miss, but I tell people it's really about if the people are there, because whether it's hit and miss for one person, it could be successful for the person to the right of you. And it's also a testament to your strategy of selling, whether how you're selling at the table and whatnot. So it's really if the crowd are there, if it's promoted, and again, I know we're spotlighting Cowtown a lot, but I saw so many promotions for Cowtown, and I heard so many people talking about it. This was one of the conventions that I heard a lot more about than, I guess, the average conventions that I do. And I don't want to say that they're average, because they're all great conventions to me. But sometimes you got to ask to make sure that you're going to a convention with the showrunner who knows what they're doing. And I think that's really the most important thing, is as long as they know what they're doing, as long as you're confident whenever you're going in there, because the last thing you want to do is not be confident going in and selling on that day, though 2 days, 3 days, because that's going to drop your sales dramatically if you're not in that moment right there. And you're worried about, hey, are there actually going to be customers here? Am I going to be able to get away from the table when I need to? Is my setup right? Are there rules that are a little bit too tight or not? And that's really one of the things that a lot of creators, and I've talked to a few people about, is sometimes they don't know the rules of the conventions or whatnot, because different conventions have different rules. How would you go about telling people dealing with the setup? I mean, is there a certain way that you feel you're comfortable with the person bringing a setup into a convention, or that you advise someone to do it?
Well, let me answer that question. But first, I wanted to kind of go back to what you were saying about the being at the conventions and choosing the proper one for you. Everybody's different. Everybody thinks differently. Everybody processes differently. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but one of the things that I push, and I think I've told you this in the very beginning, one of the things is when you go into these shows, you yourself have to have a positive outlook on everything. If you, for some reason, just not having a good day, I don't know, it could be anything, headache, allergies, you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever, you have to step onto that floor. You can walk angry from your car to the building, but as soon as you walk in that building, you have to feel like you're $1 million. You have to look like you're $1 million, because that's the one thing that we forget, is that people can read your faces and read your body language. And if nobody approaches you and you're just in a very foul mood, or, we see a lot of negatives out there just sitting there, and if you do that, nobody's going to approach you. So you will not have a good show. If you do your best, put a smile on your face, reach out to people, stand up. How many times have I told the crew, like, stop sitting down, stand up. People are like, I'm tired of standing. I'm like, then get better shoes, it just, you have to be embracive to the fans. You have to let the fans know it's like welcoming you over. You have a key to my house. You can come into my door. Here is my booth. This is what I have to offer. I've had numerous people over the last 20 years buy stuff from me and my table and not give a care about what I have. Hey, can I sign that book for you? I'm not going to read it. I just liked your attitude. That's great. Like, you really make people's day that way. So remember, when you go into these shows, have a fantastic attitude. Whether you're doing bad, the show's doing bad, whatever it is, have a good show. That really matters.
Having said that, I did a lot of scouting before I had my first comic, and I went to a few conventions, including Cowtown, like I said. I went to a few conventions beforehand just to kind of scout and see how it is and how the people reacted. And I remember at one of the conventions, I had a certain amount of money in my pocket, and I said to myself, I'm going to walk around this entire convention, and the first person that stops me with a decent greeting, I'm going to buy their product. I remember walking around that convention floor the entirety twice and not getting a hi, a smile, a greeting. And I was like, this is one of the things that I definitely wanted to make sure that whenever I got a table was that I said hi to everybody I could. If you've seen my setup, I put a candy bowl out there. I'm like, look, I understand you're walking around. You might be here all day. You might be a little bit low on energy. Here's a piece of candy. even if you're not going to buy from me, get that energy just in case, so you make your way back around to me and you can come back and talk to me. I don't mind. And it's like, you have to definitely make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. I say every convention is like my Olympics. You're walking in there, you're trying to win that gold. I mean, I'm not trying to compete against everybody. That's not the type of person I am, but I'm trying to compete against myself because I want to be better every time.
Absolutely. Be better every time you do a show. Be better than the one before.
Yeah. So, and like I said, that I know this subject about whether your setup is within range of the limitations or not. This isn't exactly the sexiest subjects, but I know this is a subject that I really was worried about when I started. Is there stuff that's too high? Is there stuff that's not acceptable to showrunners, kind of thing?
That's a good question, and every show's different on that. I've encountered shows because I am in so many ways Ken Salinas' right hand man, and so I don't know how many times we've set up his setup, and promoters come by and said only 9 feet, bring it down, or that's the table's too high, or we were at a show. I'm not going to name any names, but we were at a show that I've done 3 or 4 times. And this past year was at the show, and one of the professional hands that were helping run the show came by and told me, there's 4 books on your table that you have to take off. And I said, how come? Well, it's because they promote nudity and stuff like that. Well, the covers weren't nudity, but the book itself, the interior pages. Right. It's kind of cool because I got to give the person credit because they knew their stuff. Yeah. So the interiors that was in the bag and board had nudity from books I've worked on with other people. So they were just like, hey, in our paperwork, we don't want any of that kind of. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't read the paperwork, so that's my bad. So I take it down. If you have rules and they're professionally followed, that's great. It makes everybody's job easier. Those are usually not even rules that are in shows. That just happened to be one out of my 20 years doing this. But height things like big backdrops and like a lot of the artists will do their big print walls. I think some of the shows, like especially in hotels and smaller events like libraries, community centers, right? There's only so high you can go, but they don't want you to be touching the ceiling because it's not their ceiling. So just kind of play by the rules, look at their paperwork. Hey, if they say only 8 feet, but you have a 20-foot backdrop, just go 8 feet. Don't like they're just doing their job. And you got to remember, my biggest joke is like, you got to remember, even though the promoter is telling you like, this is what you need to do, it's probably most likely not because they made the rule. Right. It's because the convention center that they rent that space from has rules. Like, right. I think Kim and I got pegged a year or 2 ago for having water. And we were like, it's just water. They're like, no outside drinks. Like, what? So instead of arguing with people, we're just like, it's fair enough. Ken and I did a show and somewhere on the West Coast, I think it was earlier this year. And I just get, me and my coffee. I just got my dark roast. It's hot. It's ready to go. I'm walking into the show and it's on the first day. And the lady says, hey, you got to pour that out or drink it because it's not allowed in here. So you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those
people,
It's one of those things you have to kind of roll with. I usually take a backpack again because I usually have me and one of my kids with me, and we take snacks and drinks, kind of water to kind of have throughout the day, so I don't have to leave the table. But I've had that where they said you're not supposed to have anything outside, and it's like it's hard to walk that line because that the cost of the convention stuff is a little bit higher, and if you're having water.
It's funny. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's funny you just said that the cost of the convention. Yeah. It triggered something in me. Like I've never done this myself. I never will, but I've overlooked or seen, however you call it, like just overseen from a distance, people that go, like we'll pick on Fan Expo. You said they were $400 a table.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, I paid $400 a table. I should be
Yeah.
able to do what I want. Okay, again, let's rewind. It's not their rules. It's the convention's rules. So like, let's be careful. Like, I mean, man, you go to these repop shows that are ran
Right.
by, unions and
The
stuff.
bigger, yeah.
You better watch out. They'll
Yeah.
push your table back just to pull up carpet. That's
And
no joke.
that's the thing. I mean, because I was at a convention where the person next to me had a big backdrop, and it kind of ran into my area, into the area on the other side of him. And the other I didn't mind because my backdrop and everything's a little bit smaller than most. But the other person was kind of upset about it, and they ended up asking him to leave if he wouldn't like shorten it or bring it down a bit. And he was upset, saying what you said. I paid so much money, but they give you the rules whenever you pay, and
Sure.
Usually a lot of them will give you diagrams of how big the area is, so what you can take and what you can't. I think I had one that had like no video device or had to pay extra for that. And again, it's really because how others are going to perceive you or how they're expecting. They don't want music from one place because everybody will end up having music, and it kind of just makes the event a little bit worse than it should be.
Well, and just remember, just be good with people, be aware of your neighbors when you're doing these shows. And, if somebody's over your line of space, I mean, don't feel like you need to cause a scene or anything like that. Just go to that person and say, hey, can you scoot yourself over in your space? Because I'm trying to set up my space. Most likely 99% of the time, they're just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that, it happens all the time. There's no need to like cause issues or anything like that. Like, just remember, we get up to those shows in the morning and we sit there with our little chalk and tape and we measure those areas off 10 by 10s or whatever it is, 6 by 8s, whatever the shows have. And that takes a lot of time. So we just ask that you be friendly to your neighbors, be neighborly and, keep in your guidelines. If your neighbor says, hey, hang your backdrop over into my section. Okay, that's cool. Whatever works. Just let's be friendly about it. You're there at a Comic-Con. Just remember, you're there at a Comic-Con. I know you're there to sell, right? But you're doing something that 1 out of 10 people in this world want to do, which is follow their dreams and goals to do something like that, but they won't do it because they may not just have the capacity to do it. So you're at a show, you're following your dreams and goals, you're having so much fun. Just play by the rules and have fun and meet your neighbors and do your networking and sell your books and, just have fun. That's what life's all about,
Yeah, definitely. Now, the last subject I really want to talk about conventions is probably the timeline of when you have to book them, because it really varies from convention to convention.
Right.
And I know whenever I started out, I was kind of shocked and awed by, well, this convention is coming up next month. I had a convention a few months ago that came up within a week. And I was kind of shocked. They were like, why didn't you come to the convention? I was like, well, I was booked at a different one. So it was like, I couldn't have got out of this convention to go to that one because I already paid for a table. But you get that timeline of conventions are so sporadic. How is it that you start planning those or is there a site that you can find a list of conventions? How would you tell a new creator to do that?
I think there is a convention site that just has a list of conventions now. 60% of it's not right.
Right.
Because, you go to that show and then you're like, there's no website. Oh, there's no social media. Oh, the show doesn't exist anymore. So there's that. Now, with Charter Comics and CCP Comics, we book a year and a half in advance with all of our people. So we know what shows are going to happen later next year. We know even possible shows that are going to happen in 2024. Right. Now, that's because of a lot of different reasons. One is because it's a show that we do consistently every year. So they'll tell us like, hey, man, you're going to be here for 23, but are you going to be here for 23 or 24? Yes, just like leaving New York Comic Con. I saw the field rep and he was just like, okay, see you next year. Dates are going to change middle of the month. And I was like, what? Like, it's usually the first weekend of the October. And so I literally got home and I couldn't find it. And I had to email the guy and I was like, what? And he was like, no, is that a problem? No, I'm there. Just, I need to make sure the dates are right. There's a lot of shows that are moving around too. Like, they want to move their dates, and that's a good thing. Never look at that as a bad thing, because what it probably entails is that they figured out their shows on a date of another show, whether it's big or small, and they don't want to compete with that. So they're going to move their dates. So yes, we try to, or we say them, they try to get to those websites and update it as fast as they can. But again, it's 24-hour gigs. So it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier to say yes than it is to start updating every social media platform out there. So, what I do is and I do it a lot of different ways, but the secret of my success is, like, in the past with these promoters that I feel like I'm friends with now and that I do their shows repeatedly. When that show ends, just like you and I were talking about, hey, thanks for having me at the show. I really appreciate it. Hey, I want to be a big part of your show. I want to be a big part of it every year. I need to do what I can. And a lot of times the promoters will say, okay, well, we're working on next year's dates. This is our general area of date that we're trying to have it on. Message me in a week and we'll get you locked down. So that means you're either going to have to pay for it or you're going to put down a deposit or something. I've been lucky enough to meet these promoters over the year to where they will give me a year in advance of their shows, and I'll just book a list of it down. Now, when I build my feeds for my crew, I probably won't build them until like a month or two, maybe 3 months before the show, because I'm like, well, the tables are locked down. And I talk to all my people personally without the feed in the beginning. And I'm like, hey, we're doing the show. You down? Yeah, cool. You doing it? Yeah, we're down. Okay, I'm going to build the feed. And then everybody that I missed on trying to communicate to will get thrown on a feed. You were just thrown on a feed that a show's going to happen in 6 weeks. It's like, I've known about the show for a couple months, but it's we have the tables locked down. Everybody's ready to go. It's going to be a fun little show. You never know when things are going to change. So a lot of times I won't build feeds because there's changes happening in the show that, politics wise or whatever. And I won't even go to my crew and talk to them about it, because it's a waste of time to just be like, okay, so this is what's happening and this is what I think is going to happen. So I'll just delay it about a week, because everybody's working hard to do what they need to do on the promoting side and the Comic-Con side. So it's hard to justify certain things that are happening in industry alone. And so if you're looking for good advice on how to book shows in advance, talk to those promoters, talk to those promoting hands, the people that help them out, and let them know, like, hey, I want to be on a consistent basis at this show, because it's a good show. Whether you had a good show or not, it's a good show. The community's good. The networking's good. You like what they're doing. You love your setup and stuff like that. And there's a lot of times you can even go to them and say, hey, I definitely want to be a part of next year's show. Right, cool, you're in. Don't worry about it. We'll take your payment in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so I liked where I was at, but can I be here? Okay, yeah, sure. Send us a note. A lot of the promoters, that's what we forget. We're dealing with human beings. Just talk to everybody. And I'll pick on myself as a promoter. Talk to us. Let us know. We had that in the Cowtown. We did 2 Cowtowns this year. Earlier this year, we had a couple of folks that said, man, I like the show. That's great. I don't want to be here. Can I be here? Yeah, let me see what I can do, because we're one of those shows of the many that we do not book tables or like taking suggestions. Hey, I want to be at table 7. Oh, okay, let me put you at table 7. We don't do that. We just try to work with our floor plan and put you in the best spot where we can find it. So there's a lot of people that will come to us and say, hey, I don't like inlines. Can I do a corner? Absolutely. This is how much it's going to be. We'll find a corner for you. Thank you for giving us a heads up. That's important, because you want to be comfortable when you go to that show. But talk to those promoters. That's the bottom line. Talk to those promoters. Let them know that you're very interested in their show. The bigger shows, I know people are very shy because they're like, well, I don't want to go to this multi-million-dollar show promoter and just be like, hey, I'd like to be a part of your show forever. But you have to do that, or they will never know. My director rep of Reed Pop that I've had for 13 years. Well, let me retract. That I had for 10 years disappears, right? I don't even know. I had a new rep, and I was just like, okay, new rep. I guess that's the way it goes. Never saw the guy again until Charter Comics was with Pastime at Dallas Fan Expo. I don't know, a couple years ago, and the guy shows up, and he's like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" So I work for Fan Expo now. Like, oh wow, that changed everything. I was like, well, it makes sense. Everything ties in. But the dude didn't have to come to me and say that. He came to me and introduced me to the owner of the event because I was always super nice. I always thanked him. I always put my best foot forward and made sure my setups were good. I followed the rules and I listened and I worked every year to be a part of that show. That was his biggest concern with me, was that, or not concern, but that was the biggest reward for him, was that I followed through. Hey, I want to do your show. Okay, well, the tables are expensive. I don't care. I want to do it. These are your guidelines. I don't care. I want to do it. Like, I want to be at those shows and I want to be thankful, and I want people to know that I'm thankful for myself and my crew to be there. And I think that's super important for these promoters when you're out there and you are the Paul Gomez's or the McLain McGuires or whatever, and you got all your stuff and you're dragging it out of the rafters, and you're like, hey, thanks for the show. That was so great. Appreciate it. And that means a lot, I mean, that's book your shows, talk to the promoters, book your shows.
Ask.
Yeah, just ask. Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to hurt. Send them an email before, if they're sold out. Send them an email, see if you can get on the waiting list. It's worked for me once, and I've only been in the business about a year. So, send them an email. Ask. It doesn't hurt to send that email. Before I let you go, I got two real big things I wanted to ask. One, I met you as a letterer. I know you do everything, but I met you as a letterer. How many books have you lettered? 100? 200?
In my career, I've lettered over 356 books, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does somebody get McLain McGuire to letter their book?
It's just like talking to a promoter. You just got to ask.
Ask. And like you said, you've done 300 books, so you're definitely known. I was on a telecast with someone from New York, and they're like, oh, you had McLain McGuire do your book. And I was like, yes, I did. And I was like, no, not only did he do my book, but I feel like he's a partner in Bushy Boo Circus Mysteries. And I feel, like I said, every time that I feel like he's going to be there with me on every issue of this book.
Well,
the second...
that's what's important, is like, finding books that you can work with and work on that you respect and appreciate. And, like you've come a long way with the books that you've created and that you've put out in the world. And I mean, you're still cranking away, man. I mean, that second issue of Bushy Boo was outstanding. That was a lot of fun to do. And, and on my end with Chris at Charter Comics, I mean, this year alone, we've, as the year ends, these last 2 months, we will have produced, I think, 10 titles this year alone, amongst I don't know how many. I don't know at this point. I'm exhausted, but but that's what it's all about, is staying consistent, doing what you do, staying consistent, releasing books. Doing what Charter does is stay consistent, release books. I was just on the phone with Chris this morning talking about, hey, don't forget, I need you to write this book. Not that I'm the boss, but I'm like, I need you to go and write this book because we have to have it finished by the end of this year. And then he's, on the other hand, he's going, so the Kickstarter that you're building right now, we got to get that book released. That's what we're doing. So that's what it's all about. It's all consistent.
Yeah,
definitely. Congrats to you on your success on everything.
Thank you.
So far.
You too. And that leads to my second question is www.charter.com. What do you have going on? Is there a Kickstarter currently going? Is there anything you'd like to plug? How would they get a hold of you?
You can definitely find Charter Comics at chartercomics.com. Social media is all Charter Comics. You can find me on there, just my name, just proper spelling. I hate saying that to people, but I don't know how many people are like, I emailed you 20 times. And it's like, well, there's no Q in my name, Wink, wink. I hope he's watching, but no, joking aside, just, you can find me on McLain McGuire on Twitter, TikTok, all the social medias. My website's going to be rebuilt, and it should launch in January. But Charter Comics, we have our website that streams. We have all our social media handles. So you name it, we're on it. What do we have new right now? Man, so we have 2 more Kickstarters coming out. We have 4 more books next 2 months. Can you believe it's November? It's November.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I think it was just January when I was saying, hey, man, cannot wait to Black Friday in November. And then I'm like, oh, that's 2 weeks away.
So just a year ago, I put out one.
Yeah, just a year ago, right? So we have we're doing the Ferryman series. And Chris has nailed out another freaking masterpiece called Ferryman Tales Presents Shades of Death. And we have 9 solid covers on our Kickstarter that are from amazing people like the Ryan Kincaid. Ivan Tao did this really beautiful cover.
So
Paul
beautiful.
Hayes. Yeah, I mean, we got Ken Salinas. There's just a ton of folks on there, and these covers are immaculate, So we have, I think, 1 or 2 more tiers to build on the Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter will probably launch next week, but there's a good chance we're just going to hit the button. You know how that goes. It's just like, man, just hit the button, bro. Just hit it, So, because as soon as we're done, and we just, I think we have 1 more day. God, I forget. We have 1 more day for 2032 Kickstarter. So there's 1 more day. We've hit goals, so it's been successful. I'll take the heat for both me and Chris that we are sorry we just have not been really paying attention that much to that Kickstarter. Not that we haven't been paying attention, but we had Cowtown, we had all this stuff. So we just let it run its course. We let it run, and the fans have been fantastic running that Kickstarter for us. So thank you guys all for supporting us and everything on that. But I mean, we have already that's going to hit in 23, the first part of 23. We already have, I think we counted 9 titles that have hit in the first quarter. So, I mean, lots of good stuff, a lot of fun creators, on our bill. So it's exciting. We're super pumped. So
I take congratulations to everything you're doing. Thank you so much. I feel like you're a mentor to me and help me along in my success. So I appreciate everything. I feel you're, like I said, a partner whenever it comes to Bushy Boo.
Yeah.
McLain McGuire, everybody, if you don't know him, email him, talk to him. He does everything, so he can definitely help you out somewhere. We've got some other great shows lined up in the works for next week and the week after. I hope to see y'all again. McLain, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Have a great week. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Guys.
How do you end this thing? How do you put there was the brakes on this bus? I forgot.
Jazz hands. Jazz hands. Have a good
night. Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month, we add more.